In my July 2018 DCC corner column, I talked about stay alive devices and included a diagram showing a basic schematic of the circuit that can be used to build your own. And I'll show you how to solder up your own stay alive device. Okay, I've got everything laid out here, so let me just run through and show you the various components that are used, and then I'll get to the soldering part. Okay, these are the supercapacitors that are used in these devices. This one is fairly small, about I think about 6 by 10 millimeters, something along that line. These here are a little bit larger. At any rate, so these are a little bit bigger. They're rated about 2.5 volts. These are rated at 2.7 volts, the little blue one here. And I also found on Mauser some that are rated at 3 volts. So I'm going to stick with these 2.7 and 3 volt ones. The 3 volt ones, I don't have any handy, but you can see this is one that I made up with the slightly larger 3 volt version, and this is the 2.7 volt. And you can see with the same number of capacitors, you get a much smaller package. This one, however, is rated for 15 volts, and this one's rated at 13.5 volts. So there's a trade-off to be made. If you need more power for a larger scale, then you might go with the 3 volt ones. But for now, I'm going to stick with my small blue ones. Okay, so the other option that you have is working with these standard through-hole components that are easier to handle. And I've used these for most of what I've worked on. They're easier to work with. They've got these nice long leads to pick them up with. And you certainly can't do that with the surface mount component. They're much easier to work with. And to be honest with you, in the long run, it doesn't save you that much space going with the surface mount devices. So what I've done here is I've gone ahead and prepared the setup. I've already pre-cut all the components, so it doesn't take all day to shoot this video. Okay, let's zoom in a little bit and take a good close look at what I'm going to do here. Okay, first, I've lined up my capacitors. I've already pre-cut them, as said. You just want them long enough, the leads long enough, so that they overlap when they're put next to one another. Okay. Now we're going to work from the negative side of the schematic or the diagram that I showed to the positive side. So how do you tell negative from positive? Well, on the side of the device, there is a white stripe with a little negative mark on it. That is the negative side. You can see right here, it's got the, trying to get this on camera, you can see the white stripe and it's negative. Okay, so you always want that terminal to face the negative end of the circuit. Okay, so it would be like this in the circuit. If I were going to go to 6, I would add it here. So let's put that aside. I've already lined up 5 of these, so that gives me a 13.5 volt stay alive unit. And I've overlapped them here, negative to positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive. And I've turned the leads at each end sideways so that later on, when I go to add on the resistor and the diodes, that it'll be easier to do that. Okay. And in the end, I'm going to put those on the side of the stay alive device. I've taken a piece of masonite here and used a piece of double stick Scotch tape attached to it, and then the components are just sitting on that, and that keeps them from floating off while you're trying to solder. So then it's a simple matter to take your soldering iron and melt a bit of solder on each one of these little connections here. like so. And that's all there is to it, getting those together. Now, as you can see, I've already laid out through the whole components, the resistor, the diode, and the zinniodiode in line here. Okay, first I'm going to solder these components together so that they'll be installed as a single unit instead of trying to solder them individually to the capacitors. That one. That one. And then I'm going to add this green wire to go between the positive end of the capacitors and this center point here on the between the zinniodiode and the other two components. So let's go ahead and add that. I've already pre-tinned it. So it should be a simple matter to just touch it to the other components I just worked on. Okay, that's good and tight. Okay, now we've got these components soldered together. Let's add them to the capacitors. So let's put the capacitors here. Again, negative, positive. And we're going to want, I'm going to bend the lead on this diode here up a bit so it will overlap with what I want to solder it to. And we'll just drop it into place here up against the negative capacitor. Okay. So now that I've got that in there, I'm going to hold it and just melt that solder and make a good solder joint there. That's all there is to it. Okay, so now we've got that connection made. Let's add some more wires. Okay. First, we have to add a black wire. So I've got this small piece of black wire that I'm going to tin. Get it ready to solder on. Okay, so the black wire is going to be our negative contact, so I'm going to hook it up to the negative end of the circuit. Like so. Okay. And then the blue wire, so I need to, oh, there it is. The blue wire, I'm going to tin it. Okay. Now, as you can see, the blue wire is going to go to the end of our components here. It's attached to the end of the resistor and the diode here. Don't know if you can see that too well. And finally, the green wire will be adding to the positive end of the capacitors. So let's go ahead and add the blue wire first. That's all that is. And let's see, we've got our green wire. I'm going to have to bring it over and trim it right about there. Okay. Now I'm going to tin the end of the green wire. And then maybe get this into position so that I can attach it. So excuse me while I mess with getting it in there. Okay, I think I can do that now. Okay, so that's all there is to it. So we've got the string of capacitors, 13.5 volts. We've got our 13 volt linear diode here to act as the circuit protector. Our resistor for our inrush current regulator, and the blocking diode, so current only moves in one direction. So that's the device right there. However, you're going to want to protect this. Now, I've seen people use tape, electrical tape on these. I've seen folks use other types of Zapton tape, for example. What I prefer is, I found this PVC shrink tubing on, I believe, Amazon. It flat, it's 1 inch, and it's sold to be used to make wrappers for batteries, for lithium polymer batteries. In many cases, you can find it listed under that, but it's easy to find. So you just cut it into, it comes in a big ribbon of like this. This is about 30 feet of it, a lifetime supply to say the least. And you just cut off about an inch or so, inch and a half, whatever you need, and slide your component in there, and then you have to hit that with a heat gun, and it shrinks down to something that looks like this. So it's nice, neat, protected, and I guarantee you with that nice green color, I'm not going to lose these suckers. You can get them in all different colors. They have red, blue, purple, all kinds of different colors. And then once I seal that up, it'll be ready to use.